Are your fears of dash cams holding you back? Well, today we've got the 5 different ways that dash cams can benefit drivers, and we're talking with our guest, Eric Jacobson of Tivitri Incorporated. Hello, I'm Andrew Winkler, and this is Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking, a podcast that helps over-the-road truck drivers balance career and family. Hey, thanks for joining us on this episode of Driven Too Far. Today we've got Eric Jacobson with Tivitri Incorporated. And today we're talking about the 5 ways cameras can benefit drivers. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Say, before we jump in and talk about the 5 ways, one of the things I'm curious about is just where does the industry stand right now with cameras? How many, have all the large fleets already adopted them and you're kind of working on small fleets, or where's the industry at?
Sure. So that's definitely changed over the past 5-6 years since I've been in the space. When we started these conversations, when I started at the company anyways, it was common to hear a lot of, our drivers are super concerned about privacy and they don't want cameras. No one wants Big Brother looking over their shoulder. And that was the sentiment. Over those past 5 years, it's really changed more to, hey, my buddy got exonerated. They said that it was his fault and the camera showed that it wasn't his fault. And now I want cameras in my truck. So it's definitely shifted more towards a more camera friendly environment.
And I always recall, like, every time, we go through an industry change, it seems like you kind of go through this, right? When we think back when we went to ELDs and you had big pushback from quite a few drivers at the time, they didn't want to go away from the paper. It was something new. And there's just that fear that seems to be associated with the change. And it sounds like now we're kind of pushed through that fear and people are pretty receptive to putting a camera in the truck.
Yeah, the statistics are definitely in the driver's favor here. It shows, I've heard as many as 8 times out of 10, a driver is not at fault in an accident. However, if there's not a camera to show that, it's like 70 or 75% of the time, the trucking companies are actually paying out. So if the professional driver is not at fault 80% of the time, why is the trucking company paying out 70 to 75%?
Right. And they're just trying to settle it before it goes to court and gets to be really, really big dollar figures. In fact, I just had one of those instances in our own fleet here in the last probably 60 days. We had a female driver. She was shooting down the highway at 65, right at the speed limit. And another truck was coming off a gravel road and there was an ice patch and that other truck couldn't stop. So he kind of T-boned our truck. But the beauty of it was, thankfully nobody was hurt, first of all, but the beauty of it was, the insurance company instantly knew what to do. There was no questions about who was at error, and it wasn't even a conversation. It was how fast can we get this thing settled and put to bed?
Yeah, and it works the same way on the other side. Sometimes your driver, in the rare instance, is at fault, and at least you and your insurance company know exactly how to tackle that situation. It's going to save a lot of money in the long term, get it settled quicker.
Well, let's talk about the first of the 5 ways they help drivers. Talk more about the exoneration thing and what have you seen? Do you have any good stories or anything where maybe you've had a fleet you've worked with? It really helped them out or saved them some big dollars, something like that?
I certainly do. An example that I always talk about is Sunburst truck lines down in Houston, Texas. They had a driver who was driving down the road. I wish I could share the video. I actually have it queued up. I wish I could share it, but driver was driving down the road. There was an off ramp on the right side of him and another truck to the left side of him, another tractor trailer. And the vehicle just decided they were going to come whipping around that other tractor and try to make that off ramp. And, of course he didn't make it, rolled over. It was a terrible crash. And the crazy thing about it is that the witnesses that pulled over for that were the vehicles behind that saw this happening. And they pulled over, and when the officer got on scene, they both gave eyewitness testimony that the Sunburst truck line truck clipped the truck and spun it out of control, sending it into the ditch. But when you look at the camera footage, and I can show it to you sometime, it's absolutely not the case. The Sunburst truck line didn't come within 10 feet of the truck. It came in across, but the perception of the people behind the vehicle didn't see it that way. So they weren't being fraudulent in this instance. This is just what their perception was. And so unfortunately, that driver would have been hemmed up big time for that accident, and he was not at fault. So, without the dash camera, the story that I've been told over and over is, the professional driver's already at fault because the name on the side of the door. And like I said, those statistics are definitely in the driver's favor if you have the tools to exonerate yourself.
Well, and what's interesting about that is, like you said, it's the eyewitness accounts weren't even accurate. Now, they were probably to the best of their knowledge of what they thought they saw, but the video doesn't lie. We can slow it down. We can speed it up. We can look at it a lot of different ways, to try to get to the truth there. But before cameras, that's all you relied on was either witnesses or somebody's own statement of what happened. But that's definitely a great example of how the cameras can help drivers out.
Yeah, it's tough to argue with eyewitnesses that thought they saw something and they didn't see it correctly. And I just see example after example on these dashboards where the drivers are exonerated. And so it's nice to see them being able to have that evidence to back them up. I just can't imagine how frustrating it would be knowing you didn't do anything wrong and then being found at fault, where it's hitting your driver record. Doesn't look good on your company. All these costs are passed on to the trucking company and these insurance companies, but ultimately that reflects on the driver's pay and benefits, right?
Well, it could have certainly put that, his career to an end too, if he got pinned with that. One of the things I think about that used to happen, unfortunately, quite frequently to us was like truck stop accidents where somebody's parking at night, it's dark, somebody clips the nose of your truck and, tears off your hood or something like that. And of course they get spooked and they're off. And if there wasn't any witnesses, here you are stuck $20,000, $30,000 repair if they got the hood, got into the radiator, the air-to-air cooler and all that. And you didn't have anybody to, go back and try to chase down. But cameras, I would think, would help that way as well, right?
Yeah, we heard that over and over, that we need a solution that's able to record after the vehicle turns off. To be able to, the driver's sleeping in his truck and all of a sudden he just gets woken up by a shaking truck. And by the time he's up and got his, getting dressed, he or she, excuse me, there's nothing they can do. The truck's gone. And they have nothing.
Pull your pants on, get out of the sleeper. They're gone. There's not much you can do. So, I think if I remember right, is there some kind of a panic button or something on the cameras as well? How does that work?
There is. Some of the solutions we offer do have panic buttons. So it really gives the driver a sense of control, knowing like, hey, this vehicle just cut me off. I had to slam on the brakes, and this is going to somehow affect my safety score. And giving them the panic button and the ability to hit that button and send the footage directly to their safety manager or their dispatch manager or, whoever is managing them, gives the driver a sense of control over what they're seeing. And at least they know that video is going to be dismissed and that's not going to calculate against their overall score.
So give us a basic lesson of how the cameras record on the loop and, how much, if I hit that panic button, is it going back in the history so far in capturing that video?
Yeah, it's typically the panic button is going to set it back, 10 seconds before, 10 seconds after is typical. The cameras that we work with typically will record continuously, so they are recording at all times. However, the driver's always like, no one wants someone watching them all day, right?
Right.
The truth is, no one has the time to watch drivers all day, and they're not. The only time the video is actually sent from the camera recording, which is local to the truck, to the cloud, is if something significant is happening, like a crash or a harsh break or an AI event saying, hey, we almost got into a collision here. And that's just to give that continuous improvement experience to the driver, which is, I think, one of the other items here I guess we could touch on.
So,
but
in the camera itself, what triggers an event? Maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, so there's two ways to trigger an event. One is a kinetic event. Kinetic event meaning there's a harsh deceleration or acceleration or a turn of some
side
kind.
to side motion.
Significant.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, significant motion of some sort. Those are called kinetic events. The other is AI events, right? AI is a big buzzword right now. So it depends if you have a dual facing camera or a forward facing camera. Some common alerts that are AI based for forward facing cameras are following distance, right? Like I honestly put one of these cameras in my wife's car. And that's because I told her, honey, you're tailgating. You're constantly tailgating people. If they stop, you don't have time to stop. And so, that's one big way. It's just those audible reminders in cab that can say, hey, increase following distance, increase following distance. Sometimes you just do things subconsciously, and it's nice to have those in-cab alerts. So the AI detects that based on your speed and based on the danger that's associated in your company's policies. It'll remind you, hey, maybe we need to increase the following distance. Another example would be like rolling stop signs.
Okay.
It would detect maybe it's a bad habit. You have rolling through stop signs without stopping all the way. It's gonna alert those.
I remember those distinctly when we put the cameras in our fleet. The first couple months, that's what you saw a lot of, rolling through stop signs, tailgating type things. And until you get the drivers coached and, they start to get used to it as well. Now those events are far and few between. So it's amazing the impact it's had on our own fleet. And I know, at least in our case, ours is connected to kind of a safety score, if you will, where the driver gets kind of a report card of how his driving's going. And the cool thing about that, you always have a few that need some work, but for the most part, I'd say 85-90% of the drivers, they were competing. They wanted that top score. And the best part of that story was you get this guy calling, and he didn't think something's fair on the cameras because he's got a 98 out of 100 and he thinks he should have a 99 or 100 perfect driving. So they get so uber competitive with each other. It was kind of cool to watch.
That sounds like a healthy safety culture to me.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So,
yeah, and that's cameras are really what I love about them, right? Is they give those drivers the ability to improve, right? I mean, even if you look at professional athletes, a professional golfer, a professional basketball player, drivers are like everybody else. They want to be great at what they do, and by having that footage available, you're able to go back and see, hey, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? How was my backswing? How was my jump shot? What was I doing right? What was I doing wrong? It's the same for drivers. You got to have those tools to really be able to make improvements. If you can't see it, it's hard to change. It's hard to get better. And I think drivers are similar to everybody else in that fashion.
There's a lot of fraud going on in the industry right now. Over on the dispatch side, I think about the double brokering and stuff, but we've also all heard about the instances where there's people out there doing fraudulent accidents and, trying to get some big bucks out of the carrier. So how can these help us as carriers prevent that kind of fraud from going on? Yeah,
I mean, I guess it all comes back to, we've all seen the news articles, where everywhere from, fraudsters, doctors, attorneys, all in bed together, working together in these fraudulence, and they'll look to see, sometimes they'll look to see, does this truck have a dash camera? If not, it's easy money, right? It's easy money.
And if it does, they're on down to the next truck to try to pull their little stunt. So
exactly,
just a deterrent.
The trucks without cameras, pull in front of them, slam on the brakes, and say they tailgated.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And that affects the drivers, safety records. It affects their employment and their careers. And it's too bad these guys are sharks in the water like that.
You touched earlier a little bit just on the training and coaching. You were talking about drivers wanting to self-improve and stuff, but I distinctly remember when we first got them a few times, you call the driver and say, hey, you triggered an event and this is what it looks like happened. And they want to kind of argue with you and say, that's not what happened at all. But once you bring them in and they're able to replay or see the video for themselves, it's hard to argue that. And then they're just like, okay. And I think if you can get them to that point where they recognize it and they understand it, then that's really the point at which something's going to change and you start building that healthy safety culture, like you were saying.
Indeed. Yeah, that open-mindedness, sometimes it comes from just being able to see that we all have bad habits and bad behaviors and subconscious things we do, and they're normal. I catch myself. I mean, I told you I had a dash camera in my wife's car. Well, I've got the dual-facing camera, right? And someone texts me or something, I'll pick up my phone and I'll look at it, and the camera says, "Put your phone down." Like, oh yeah, my bad. Like, thanks for the reminder, camera. I find myself, I see a lot of drivers actually talk to their camera sometimes when they get
or I see that too, where they kind of know they got busted, so to speak, or did something they shouldn't have, and they're like, yeah, kind of like they're talking right to the safety director or something, like, I know, I did that, I shouldn't have done it. That's pretty good. Talk more about the AI. You talked about it on the outward facing. What's it doing in the cab for the drivers?
Yeah, so the greatest thing, I think, for the driver benefit side of things, right, for the inside AI is the InCab Alerts, right? Audible notifications where it's processing things on the edge in the camera itself, and it's giving you InCab Alerts in the moment, like those reminders that we just talked about, right? Hey, put your phone down, right? It's not about getting them, it's about giving them those audible reminders and saying, hey, you're following too closely, increase your following distance, or, reduce your speed, you're speeding. You get driving down the road and you get thinking about whatever happened last week, your family or whatever, and maybe you get going too fast. Having those audible alerts are really handy. A big one's forward collisions, right?
Yes.
How many times have you been driving? I don't know if your personal vehicle has them, right? But I've been driving before and glance down, and all of a sudden, beep, 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 my truck locks up, and that audible alert that reminded me, saved me from getting into an accident. And so those are really great audible alerts. We talked about following distance, but the mobile phone usage, right? We do it. We all do it. It's subconscious. You grab your phone, you look at it, you set it down. You don't even think about it. It's just, you got to just be able to break that pattern. And one of the ways we see it helps drivers break the pattern is just having an audible alert. Hey, put your phone down.
Yeah.
Right?
I really, really try not to do that. I'll put my phone in a place where I'm not, constantly grabbing it at stuff. But I do know a person that she does that quite a bit, and it's really concerning for me, and I wish she wouldn't do it. But let's just say we got maybe some listeners out there that are kind of on the edge. They're teetering. Should I put cameras in? Should I not? You're talking about the audible alerts and some of this is kind of overwhelming, I think, to people. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go from, 0 to 100 with these things. How do I ease into that? And are any of those features you were talking about, is it controllable at all?
It is. So the settings for the cameras, the sensitivity of the cameras is really adjustable, by the company. So, you see a company might look at their score and say, you know what, we're pretty safe. I don't think we're that bad, but their safety score is reflected low. You could adjust some of those settings and say, okay, let's average this out. There's some things you can do there. Some fleets will start off with a forward-facing camera, and then, a couple things happen, and someone says their driver was on a phone or something, and the driver swears up and down they weren't. All of a sudden now we get the call, hey, we really need the dual-facing cameras in here. The forward-facing is great, but we need the whole picture. So we see that a lot. So some fleets will have the dual-facing camera, and maybe their top drivers with safety scores above a certain level can get the inward-facing camera cover. And if you go below a certain score, you can then you have to remove the cover, and you have to have your inward-facing camera on. So there's different ways that people leverage the technology. Some have dual facing, some have forward, and then the camera covers, and then being able to adjust those settings so that it's not, constantly dinging the drivers.
Again, I keep reflecting back on when we put stuff in, and we're probably a little over a year in now with them, and they're fantastic. And we actually started testing them before COVID hit. And then, 2020, the world kind of stops. And to be honest with you, I wasn't sure what was happening with our business revenue wise. It's like, oh my gosh, are we really going to have to pull back on some things? And so we did. We took the cameras out of the budget, and we didn't get them back in till I think we pulled the trigger late 2021 and started the installs in 22. So after we pulled the trigger on the cameras, I'm trying to think back at just our experience personally as a fleet and some of the I shouldn't call it pushback, but where were the drivers and how did they react to the cameras? And one of the things that did pop up once in a while was the speed. You mentioned that the AI was looking, or maybe it knows the highway speed, whatever the set speed limit is on that highway. Mm-hmm. And it tells safety when somebody's speeding, they got a speeding issue. And interestingly enough, when we think of that, we think, oh, if the speed limit on the interstate's 75, you must have been going over that. That isn't the case at all. In almost all cases, it was catching a driver coming into a speed zone where the speed zone would drop. So maybe it went from 75 down to 65 down to 55, and you're flowing with the traffic. You got your cruise set and you're 5 or 7 miles an hour over 10, whatever it is. And that was a big part of it. But once in a while guy would call you and say, I wasn't speeding. I think this thing is wrong. So how do you address that when you do find that the driver was actually right, the speed limit was set at a certain thing, and I don't know if it's a database in the camera or if it's actually reading the speed limit signs? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the solutions that we provide that we're both pretty familiar with has shifted, the way they go about this particular question. So for a while, the AI would actually read the stop signs as you drove by. So that way, if you were in a 65 and all of a sudden you're in a construction zone, the camera AI would actually read that, and so it would automatically make that change. And the AI reading the stop signs was good, but there was a lot of false positives, it seemed like. Sometimes it would catch a frontage road that was next to the highway, right? Gotcha. So this particular solution that I work with frequently made a shift away from the AI back to a more reliable database that just seemed to have a more accurate way of doing that. Also, the same solution gives you the ability to go in. Maybe sometimes drivers are right. Sometimes the speed database could be wrong. Not often. It's like a 98% accuracy or something like that. So it's pretty accurate. But there's the ability to go in and actually edit a road segment in some of these technologies. So if there is a chunk of road that may be misplaced or mislabeled, you can go in and edit that and make sure that it doesn't keep impacting those drivers.
So the carrier does have some control over that.
Yes.
Yeah, very good.
And one of the things that I really like is that in-app scoring, right? You're a driver, you're out on the road, and you get the call from your safety director saying, hey, your score's not great. We need to make some improvements. You don't understand how it is, right? It's some algorithm that you don't really understand. Well, what's calculating my safety score or why? And so one of the features that I really like in some of these solutions is that the driver can see right in their application what their score is and why their score is the way it is. And the cool thing about that visibility is that you know what you change, right? You have a feeling, a sense of control over, okay, I've been doing a lot of tailgating, it looks like. If I just backed off a little bit, my safety score is going to go up, and now I'm getting the safety bonus this month or whatever it is, right? So I like that transparency in the safety side of things, where the driver's able to see why their score is why it is. The safety director can also see that same information, and just that visibility just seems to create a better relationship.
Yeah, I think the transparency is key for sure. And it maybe it wasn't always in there in the early days of the cameras and stuff, but like I said before, the safety score thing, it's just been a fantastic tool to help drivers understand. And there was some friendly competition and things with it and stuff. But we started a campaign when we did that. And we kind of educated the office staff on how it worked, and that the driver either on his mobile device or on the device in his truck could have that safety score or get access to it. And we just started asking the drivers when we see them at random, hey, what's your safety score like? And they're like, and you ask a few times, and then pretty soon, they come in again. Now they start knowing, hey, I'm at 93. It's like, nice job. So yeah. It got everybody on board, even the office staff, dispatchers, whatnot. Everybody, it was a great way to start building that safety culture. We talked about stories where the cameras can help exonerate drivers and carriers from things. You touched a little bit on just the opposite of that, from a strategic decision, if we've had a vehicle in an accident, how does even if I'm at fault, how does the camera come in? Where's the value there for the camera?
These accidents, right? You see the billboards all over the highways. Get in an accident, especially with a trucking company, call us, we'll make you rich.
Yeah, I'm the hammer. I'm a lawyer. Got a big billboard, right? Been involved in a trucking accident, call the hammer. So
yeah, and all those costs get passed on to the consumers, to drivers, pay and benefits that they lose out on, right? The trucking company doesn't have as much profits. And so it affects everybody. But if like I had a fleet, he called me up, said, Eric, my driver went right through a red light. No question, it's our fault. But I got to say, I'm glad I had the camera. We knew exactly what to do. We were on site. We had our forms ready and we cut a check and we walked away from the situation. It could have been a lot worse. And so just giving the trucking company, giving the insurance company that information immediately before an officer is even on site sometimes.
Yes.
Strategically what your company is going to do to address the situation. It helps protect everybody. Right. That's what we've seen.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those too, and it's just you see the video and instantly. Unfortunately, you may be at fault for something, and it's you got to share it with your insurance company or whoever's going to be working on it. Just say, listen, get it closed up as soon as you can. We made a mistake, and we need to take care of it, and let's try to put it to bed. This is no reason to drag this thing out, type thing. So, yeah, I'd worked for a different carrier years ago, and they kind of had that big accident, so to speak. And I distinctly remember that, where the video was available, and it was, oh my gosh, it was horrific for everyone involved. And I think the one thing that maybe I would want drivers to understand if they're listening is you absolutely can be drug into these court cases. Your carrier's probably going to get sued, but they will put your name in the lawsuit as well personally. So that's the importance of these things, and why they're there to protect you and help you in the long run. So, well, what else do you want to tell us about the camera systems?
Well, I guess one other thing that is kind of newer and seems to be trending is, and drivers really seem to love it, is the 360-degree visibility.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
So there's the forward-facing dash cameras, there's the in-cab facing dash cameras, but even that doesn't tell the whole story. It tells most of the story. But what we've seen is these side cameras, or backup cameras even, have been a big hit. Driver gets hit somewhere in the back of their vehicle. They don't even necessarily know what the heck happened. They just know, I was hit and I had to pull over, and they said I was at fault, or they said my trailer didn't maintain its lane or whatever. And those side cameras have come in big, especially for companies, haul flatbed, right? Where they're getting loaded and offloaded, and you want visibility over those, because if that stuff shifts, you want to be able to show like, well, this wasn't loaded correctly. That's why it shifted, and those types of things. So the side cameras, the 360-degree visibility has definitely been trending upwards.
Yeah, I should have known to bring that up, because we're in the process of working with you guys on that, doing some experiment on a few trucks. But we had been to a group meeting and talking to some other flatbed guys, and one of them had presented this idea where they had taken a single camera off the back of the tractor shooting towards a trailer, and they were a flatbed carrier. And the whole idea there was, I think they were trying to learn a couple things. Was the driver tarping the load when they were supposed to tarp the load, type stuff? Because apparently they had some issues where, you halt for a broker and they want everything tarped, and driver said he tarped it, but when he arrived at the destination, maybe either the tarp wasn't there, he'd already taken it off or whatever, and the receiver says, well, this load wasn't tarped. So the camera would give you evidence that the load was tarped the entire time and tarped correctly. Mm-hmm. We're taking it a step further, and we'll have a camera shooting down both sides, and I think that gives us, the long length of the trailer to see if somebody happens to run into the side of the trailer or under the trailer, what's going on. But from a securement standpoint, can we see that we use the right amount of securement? Can we see a tarp that's torn loose or, starting to flap in the wind? Or it's just an experiment for us, but we're curious to see what these things are going to tell us. So I think it'll be money well spent. I'm fascinated by the AI thing. So what's on the horizon? What's next for cameras and AI? What are they going to be able to teach us and tell us and predict? And
yeah, I think a big one is, there's obviously hours of service. One of the big pain points is I have all these unassigned hours. I've got to go in and kind of, call around and figure out who was driving this truck from 1:00 to 1:27 yesterday and trying to clear all that up. And one thing that we've seen with some of the solutions is, using the AI to identify who was driving the vehicle at that time and then be able to assign those unassigned hours directly to those drivers. I think that's a big piece. There's already solutions on the market, including one that we both know pretty well, that can do that, but it's just a recommendation. Like, hey, is this Bob Jones? Yes, it's Bob Jones. Okay, then it assigns it, right? It's like it's a one-click thing, but just maybe even being able to someday refine that AI so it just automatically assigns the hours to the driver based on their.
That'd be fantastic. And I know we've talked before, but the one thing we still have struggle with is the techs when the truck's in the yard and they want to bring it into the shop for maintenance.
Yeah.
If they don't log in to the system, then you've got some unassigned drive hours or time in the system. And I think the safety crew's like pulling their hair out a little bit. It's just a daily routine. They've got, okay, who's got this? And man, wouldn't that be nice for them if that could be just automatically taken care of?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Just be knowing that, hey, that's maintenance Ted, and it recognizes their face and automatically puts, annotates that as a yard move or whatnot.
So go ahead.
Well, I was just trying to think about some of the other upcoming AI type of stuff. Probably more audible alerts. And I know that some companies are pro audible alerts and some aren't, but what we're seeing is that the audible alerts take the workload off the safety team more, the administrative side. They're just helpful reminders for the drivers, so you can maybe get nudged 3 or 4 times, and maybe a setting is set so that, hey, if you're tailgating, it's going to remind you to increase following distance 3 times before it ever even gets sent to your safety team, right? So, like every time this happens, I'm not just getting, blown up, or my safety team's not getting blown up. But if it happens 3 times, the policy is now it gets sent up, right? Different things like that are just refining that driver safety relationship a little bit more with AI. I think will happen in the future.
That reminded me of a story when, I don't think it was camera related. I think it was the trucks themselves when they started getting the collision mitigation technology and stuff like that, and the following distance and the radar in front of the truck. We had this guy come in. He was so wound up because I don't know if the truck talked to him or what, but he was mad because it kept telling him to following distance. And he's like, can't you shut that dang thing off? And it's like, well, maybe just change your habits. It'll stop. It's like he was kind of missing the whole point. But anyways, that stuff's always entertaining for sure. I'm curious, forward facing versus both inward outward. What do you think the mix is of fleets out there right now?
It's a 60-40 split right now.
Is it?
Dual facing is more dual facing than forward facing currently. It was the other way around. So yeah. And I've got a lot of fleets that they sign up for forward facing cameras. They're kind of dipping their toe in the water. They want to see how their drivers are going to react to it. And then a year later, they're saying, hey, what can we do here? We want to go to the dual facing camera. So I kind of suggest for fleets to go with the dual facing camera. And if you're dipping your toe in, just do a lens cover on the inward facing. That way you don't have to buy new hardware in a year.
Yeah, I think that's what we did. And that's where we're at right now too. We've always just done the outward facing. We try to listen to the driver concerns and stuff when we were bringing in new technology. And of course the privacy thing always came up. I kind of get it. I mean, I know how the system works. So I knew it wasn't always recording, and I knew how, it shut off and things like that. But there's just that little fear there from a lot of drivers. They don't believe what you're saying. So you give them a lens cover for it, and they certainly feel better. So real quick, how does the inward facing address privacy with the drivers? When does it shut off? And
so it shuts off there's an internal battery inside the camera. So after the ignition's off for 10 minutes is when the camera just shuts down.
Okay. So if you're putting your pajamas on, maybe wait 10 minminutes.
Wait 10 minutes
after you park.
Right. Or just snap the lens cover on there.
Yeah, that's good. Well, tell us a little bit about Tivitri, and if someone's interested, how do they get a hold of Eric?
So we're a fleet solution provider. We have multiple different solutions. We have our favorites, and we kind of take a consultative approach and understand what the fleet's trying to accomplish, whether it's telematics, safety. A lot of our solutions have many, many different integrations that integrate with those solutions. So we like to continue to provide value for our customers after the purchase in the form of support and additional services and products. Best way to contact me personally is just eric@tivitri.com. It's ERIC@TIVITRI.com. And I can help you out.
Sounds great. I really appreciate you being a guest today. You've helped us a lot and educated us quite a bit.
Thanks so much for your time.
All right, take care.
Part of the podcast.
You bet. Thanks for joining us today on Driven Too Far. If you have a topic you'd like to learn more about in the trucking industry, the link is in the show notes.